Welcome to Growth in Action with Matt Slonaker. And today I'm pleased, really pleased. I was sharing with him before I started that I attended one of his workshops. And Keenan, probably I'm a very passionate leader, and I would say I would put your passion 2x mine when it comes to making sellers in this profession even better. So, Keenan, welcome to my podcast, and I'm glad to have you on here.
Thank you,
Uh,
baby. Thank you.
so, let's start with our theme today is how buyers want to be sold to. And being a data geek myself, when your report came out in October, uh, you teased it good enough, and so when it came out, I was downloading it, I was going through it, highlighting with my marker almost every single page, and so let's start with maybe the premise of what made you, as a thought leader in this industry, as a coach, as a professional, an author. What made you? What was the premise of this with your company? A sales growth company, by the way. Talk a little bit about that. Maybe even tease up a little bit about your background. Give the listeners. But I do want to say, if we were filling a football stadium with your followers right now, you could fill the University of Michigan up with your followers and your students and pupils. And so, welcome, and I'll give you the floor to talk a little bit about yourself and the premise of the report, and then we'll start with some Q&A.
Yeah, the premise of the report was I realized that, at least what I had seen, most of the information we had, or most of what we were being fed about how to sell better or how to be a better salesperson and all that stuff, myself included, was coming from the practitioners or the leadership in the practitioners or people who played on the practitioner side, right? There wasn't a whole lot of robust data from the buyer side. And I said, well, why is that? So I said, well, let's go get some from the buyer side. So we built the survey and asked 12,100 something buyers, how they wanted to be sold. And we tried to do it to mirror a traditional sales process. So we started with some general questions, but after that, we started with cold outreach. Do you pick up the phone? Do you buy from cold outreach? Do you respond to emails? Do you, how many times someone have to reach out? Blah, blah, blah. And what do you want? What would it take for someone to get your attention? And what would it take for you to take a cold call? What would it take for you to answer an email? And how many times someone to try? So we just went that all the way through. So from there, we went through the discovery, then went through the demo, then went through the closing negotiation, and just went through the whole thing and said, okay, what do you want? What does it take? What do you do now? And then we said, all right, there you go, salespeople. Read that.
And I think based off the great insights, and I have some of them up on the screen. There's like 8 kind of key themes I kind of took from it. I guess maybe my first question around the report, when you read it, doing what you do and working with the people that you work with, what was the biggest kind of surprise to you when you read through the data?
It's not what you would think it is. The surprise was how the data suggests that they don't actually know what they're doing when they buy. So we asked a couple of questions like, have you ever bought a product or service that you didn't need or didn't want because you didn't understand the problem? And the answer was yes. Now, in hindsight, like anything else, if I had my druthers, I would have liked to have asked how frequently it happened, right? Because we didn't ask that question. So it could be once out of 1,000. So I guess that's not statistically valid or valuable, or it could have been 5 or 10% of the time. And I would argue that is statistically valuable, because if you're making a bad decision every 5 to 10% of all the decisions, oh my God, 5 to 10% of the time you buy something, that's not good. So, but what we did know is that we had, I think it was 50% of the buyers roughly said they bought something they didn't need before, right? Then we asked them if they bought something they didn't need because of the salesperson's lack of understanding of their problem. And that one was almost the same, but slightly smaller. We asked people, how often did you rescope the problem after you started the sales process, which we thought was germane, because in our mind, you probably shouldn't start the sales process until you know what the problem is, right? Now, maybe 1 or 2 scope changes, okay, but 70% of them changed, if my math is correct, 70% of the people changed it 5 to 6 times, right?
Yeah.
So that suggests they didn't really know what they were doing before they started the buying process. So I think that was the most surprising to us is how little, I guess, prepared or yeah, how little prepared buyers were when it came to understanding the problems they were trying to solve before they went out to try to buy a product.
Well, Keenan, obviously following you and attending your workshops, reading your book, that kind of leads into, up front, right, where this all starts as a seller when you're engaging a prospective buyer. Um, the whole thing about challenging, so maybe talk a little bit about some of the takeaways here and where the data kind of reinforce, you know, 3 or 4 key things that you recommend we as sellers should be doing in that initial meeting with a prospect.
I mean, there's a lot there, and I don't want to get
Yeah.
too, I don't make this a class, but I mean, at a higher level yeah, because at a high level, you got to help in the very beginning, you got to help the buyer understand the problems that they're struggling with internally. And you got to help them understand what's causing those problems, and you got to help them understand the impact of those problems. So if you as a salesperson cannot help the buyer grasp, yeah, we have this problem, but you can't help them understand how that problem is impacting them, and you can't help them understand why those problems exist in the first place, then you really aren't in a very good position. And what I found was consistent with some of our own difficult sales processes. We had one not too long ago where I asked the people what the problem was, and they said something like our salespeople aren't doing good discoveries or something. And I that's not a problem. I kept trying to explain that is not a problem. So because they're doing poor discoveries, what's happening is your win rate down, sales taking too long. Well, I think our sales taking how long? Well, we're not sure. Well, then how do you know you have a problem? Like if you don't know how long your sales cycles are, and you don't know if they're longer or shorter than they were a year before and a year before that, then what? Just because your team is a poor discovery, how do you know you have a problem? And yet they were running around trying to buy a product to solve for discovery, and we don't even know how they would measure that success, right? Like so if you can't do that, you're not really helping the buyer. And I suspect this buyer either bought the wrong thing or they bought what they bought, and now they find themselves having to sort of rescope or do different, because they didn't buy from us, do different things to try to make it work, because they just didn't really understand the problems they were trying to solve and how they measured those problems.
I'm kind of leading into that, and it's up on the screen too. It's on the far right side. Number one thing: buyers want salespeople to focus on solutions and problems, not selling products. That's we see that a lot, right? You on LinkedIn, you see a lot of thought leaders and so-called experts out there talking about this: sell the problem, don't sell features and so forth. But what did your study kind of reveal with that? And then I guess, why do you think that continues to come up as an issue with sellers?
Well, it was clear in the study that the experience that buyers want to have is they want to know that the sellers understand the problems and issues they're having. And they want there's 3 main things that came up that buyers want salespeople to know. One is their current state problems and issues and challenges they're struggling with. 2, their desired outcomes and where they want them to actually go. And then 3, a solid understanding of their product. Okay. So if you really track the order that these came in, it's almost disturbingly how consistent it is with how we teach people to gap sell in the methodology of gap selling. The methodology of gap selling says you got to find the current state, find the future state, calculate the gap, then you can talk about your product. Well, buyers pretty much mirrored that in their responses. They basically said the number one thing they want from salespeople is that they understand their current problems and challenges. The second thing they want from salespeople is to trust and feel comfortable that they understand what the buyer is trying to accomplish and their desired outcomes. And then thirdly, they want to make sure that the salesperson has a high, strong product knowledge. And so if you process that, it's basically, I need to know you know what's wrong. I need you to know what I'm trying to do. And then I need to know that what you have can actually do it. That's literally what they told you if I broke it down in that simple terms, right? The problem is salespeople are horrific at problem diagnosis. Most salespeople either have not been trained on how to do it, they've not been trained on what to do, They have not been told what they're actually looking for. And unfortunately, this one's not very popular. Most salespeople are not, okay, I'm going to say it differently. Too many salespeople lack the intellectual capacity, the business acumen, and the critical thinking skills to effectively do it. And I think that's a problem, that enough salespeople are not smart enough to execute, I'm one of them, to execute, right? To
Yeah.
execute a proper discovery.
Well, and from an executive leader running teams and so forth, I come back that I think that's the big top three failure of leadership today in many of these companies, starting at the hiring process and then more specifically at the onboarding. Keenan, I see so much where you go through this process of interviewing, say 10, 15, 20 people for an account executive selling into an enterprise, right? $2+ million a year quota. And then when they onboard them, it's like maybe they, at best, they give them a list of accounts to focus on, but there's none of this kind of the role playing. There's none of this like, here's our methodology, and we're going to use gap selling with Keenan. We're going to put you through X, Y, and Z. So, what's your take on that, and what would be your message to these executives? Because I have a lot of executives that I prospect into that run chief revenue officers, right? So that role. What's your recommendation of, say, two or three key things that as we head into the new year that these executives need to take on themselves?
Slow down to hurry up. Everybody's in such a rush. Build an infrastructure that supports the type of salesperson you want. So the first thing I would do is I would look, this is the hard part. Almost every CRO or enablement person will tell you, yeah, we have a definition of the salesperson we want, but it's not very well designed. It'll be we need someone who has done XYZ number of years. We need someone who's sold into SaaS. We need someone who's sold into medical sales, or right. And it's someone who's achieved quota. It's all this result oriented shit. What it's not is the underpinning characteristics of these people. So they don't know what they're really hiring for, right? I say you need to be hiring for business acumen. So, and you're going through the hiring process, create questions or processes or projects that allow you to assess somebody's business acumen and their critical thinking skills, right? So, so start hiring for that stuff and put that in your job descriptions. And then, so besides just developing, look for leadership. Salespeople need to be leaders, even if they're not leaders inside the company per se. They can be informal. They need to demonstrate leadership with their buyers. They have to be able to get buyers to follow them. Too many salespeople by default put themselves in sort of a what's the word I'm looking for? A subservient position, right? They just act as if the buyer is above them, and they come in. I used to say, don't become the customer's bitch. So they show no leadership in their selling authority, no leadership in their selling style. So the buyers just look at them as little peons, as little, information kiosks. Ooh, I got to write that down. They look at them like information kiosks. I'm going to take a second to write that down. That's going to make a great freaking post. Info kiosk, right? And so when you're an info kiosk,
Yeah.
right, you don't have a lot of value to a buyer. So you're not really doing much to influence the sale. So all of that goes on. But then once they hire the wrong person, then they spend so much time focused on getting them ramped up. And that means here's the accounts to call. Here's our product catalog. Here's our sales playbook. But they really don't indoctrinate them with a really solid understanding of who the buyers are, what's important to them, what their key metrics are, what the problems that they're struggling with, how those problems manifest inside an organization, who their competition is, who they sell to. Try that one on for size. Who they sell to and how their product affects the downstream effect to their customers, right? Like they don't do any of that stuff. So the reps go out there, they have no clue how selling XYZ product or service, right, acts to their buyer, affects their buyer's buyer.
Yes.
Right. And so, yeah, it's a shit show. No one really knows it.
And so it kind of, leading on that theme, and then some of what your survey was revealing, I'm kind of curious then about you know, we see this, and I'm seeing mixed data on it. I just saw this morning a report. It may be maybe from Gartner about how only 4% of the organizations using AI are actually using AI
Yeah.
effectively, right? So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, as we see the B2B professional seller selling multi-million dollar deal into the enterprises, you know, how do you see AI helping in this whole process? Where should we as executives be investing in AI? And by the way, maybe this is a good time too to talk a little bit about your noted analytics venture that you did back in 23, how that's going, and is that play into this as a solution? Give me a sense of that too.
From an AI perspective, not quite, although we literally just had a meeting on that the other day, and of we're looking at using AI to help get uh, the buyer input data, is what we call it, the bid information, into the appropriate fields, into the CRM without the salesperson having to touch it at all. Now, like anything else, it's going to take a little time. We tried it about 2 years ago and spent a lot of money building it, and AI just wasn't there, and we missed a couple of key factors. We stumbled across those, and we're going to kind of take a run at it again. To your question about where should COOs or CROs or sales leaders use AI, you should use AI at any place that's going to give you a competitive advantage, and it's going to allow you to meet your goals. Now, the way we break up a sales organization in or at ASG is we believe a sales organization is broken up into 3 layers, right? So we could almost call it the sales management, the ideal sales management framework, right? I mean, we call it the speed model, but when you're looking at a sales org, whether you use our speed model or not, it's a fact that all sales organizations should be perceived from a management perspective through these 3 lenses: the skills and development layer, the opportunity layer, and then the forecasting layer. Okay. And therefore, if you're a CRO, on the sales side, it should be your job to ask yourself, how well have I developed each of those layers? So when you think about skills and development layer, that's where your sales training comes in. That's where sales enablement comes in, as far as developing playbooks, as far as teaching skill sets, implementing the methodology. Do you see what I'm saying? All that's at the skills layer.
Yep.
So where can AI help you there? We are about to launch a product that allows people to do role play fake calls with an AI agent across a whole bunch of different scenarios as it relates to gap selling. So that's a great place at the skills development layer to use AI to strengthen the skills of your salespeople. So in our product, it's called Gap Up. You can go in and you can pick a scenario and you can talk to a CRO and you can do a discovery, or you can do a cold call, or you could do a mini discovery that says you have to find one problem, and then you click a button, it literally rings and the person says hello, and based on the questions you ask it, it responds to you. And the reason we're doing this is I was allowed to do a sales call with it once, a discovery call, and it crushed it. I was blown away at how well it was able to respond to my deep questions about a very specific space. It was not this broad, like, okay, this is stupid. So anyways, so there's an area, right? So then you can ask yourself at the opportunity layer, which is where you actually see the salespeople do their job every day. If there's places that AI can actually help them do their job, i.e., that's where I think Node Analytics plays. How am I helping the rep actually get the bid data? Is there AI that can help me do that? Is there a way that I can use AI that actually recognizes when my salesperson did something wrong in the sales call? So that's why we think it's so important to separate these layers from the skills management layer to the opportunity layer to the forecasting layer. Why it's so important is because how you address each layer is different. You can't lump them together, right? So if I have a way to get AI to recognize in a call, a real live call, AI can then at the end of that call and say, hey, Keenan, the customer said this, and you didn't ask this question, and there could have been some valuable information. You should call them up or send them an email and ask them for that information. That's powerful, right?
Yes.
So I want you to imagine, for those of you who like football, at the end of a play, a lot of times these players go back and they get the surfaces, right? And right now they look at them and they slow it down and they say, look, you didn't see that the linebacker stepped up in that cover two. They had it disguised and it wasn't cover two. It was a dime package. You know what I'm saying? And that's why you threw the interception or you thought it was man to man. Now imagine, which will come soon, AI does that for you. So now that even the coaches don't have to look at it, AI says, we think this is what happened. We think he missed the linebacker. The linebacker took a fake to the left and then he missed the linebacker crashing. Therefore, he didn't see that the middle was open, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, the reason he missed that is because he didn't watch long enough. He has a tendency to spot the quarterback and quickly move on. We need to have him to stare at the quarterback for a full tenth of a second. Like that's where AI can play there. And it's the same thing that AI may or can do now at the opportunity layer. Then at the next layer, where can AI help you from a forecasting perspective? It should be able to pick up, AI can help you pick up on data trends on the deals that the teams have forecasted. Good AI should be able to recognize what are the common threads that are always in existence when a deal closes versus what is not. Then it should be able to tell you which reps going down through the opportunity layer are very good at getting that in the opportunity layer. And then said, these guys, oh, look at that correlation. These are your winners. And then from there, what training is required, right, to then allow you to get better sales reps. Notice very little of this is customer facing. I don't think we're there from a customer facing perspective yet.
Yeah, no, I think for the industry of B2B across the various industry sectors, I'm in financial services. You mentioned healthcare. I agree with you on that. I am seeing, I work with one solution provider that does the conversational intelligence with AI. They're using it in contact centers with loan officers and very similar as far as it does some gamification, pre-call planning, but also while you're on the call live, it's basically running through and telling you in your headset. For example, one of the things that came out with this, their analysis was that bringing up the person's dog had like a 4x success rate than not talking at all about their pet. So it's amazing, and I think that's kind of where you're going too with it. From, it's taking all that data and it's bringing up what are the things and the key actions, the key questions. I think the other place.
Watch this though. Before you move on, I want to talk about that pet thing. Now, I
Yeah.
could be wrong here, okay? I'm known to be wrong all the time. But this is where I think AI falls apart, okay? I believe, and I have no evidence of this, so if anybody has this evidence with the dog, call me up, let's talk about it. Maybe we'll put you on my show. But here's the point. I think that the AI is unable to recognize the correlation. And I think that talking about the dog is not a cause and effect. I think it's a correlation, right? So something happened in that call where that rep learned they had a dog, some way the dog came up, and then they had the conversation, they were to connect on that. But if you have AI that says that all they did was talk about the dog, now all types of salespeople are going to start asking about fucking dogs. Then they start asking about dogs. Now that little stat that they had is going to plummet because 75% of the time they ask about the dog, they never should have asked about the dog. And the AI missed the real reason the dog conversation was valuable, which cannot be replicated through an action. That's where I think it falls apart. It's too analytical.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, it's curious. I'll kind of go back to the vendor on that one and bring that up, Keenan. I'll share that with you offline. So that's a good point. I think to your, looking at that, I think just like you and I, before we got started on this, I kind of was mentioning about my visit with you and seeing your daughter and so forth. I think it's one of those things like always trying to get that you've done some research and that you try to sit here and relate to them as a person before you even start talking about the business topics. And so I think there's a theme there that, but even that point doesn't get done enough. And I think that's another area that AI, what I would love to see too, is before you get on your first call, that you have it pushed to you, not that you pull it out of your CRM or your email, whatever, that it's pushed to you, say 2 hours before, and that AI is sitting here and looking at personal, professional, looking at all those things and kind of giving you maybe 5 key themes right, that you can kind of relate to the buyer, especially if it's a cold situation and you've never worked with them before. You and I have known each other, but if I didn't know you, right, like talking about things like that, I think again, um, I think AI still has a room to improve. It's coming along, and I use it for that, right? Prepping and the recording. I use oh my god, it's escaping me right now. But obviously, I use it for my minute taking, and it's amazing how it's getting better from where it was even a year ago, with kind of picking up the tone of the conversation, and giving the assessment again that you were saying, like, hey, this was a good call, or maybe this wasn't a good call. So I think that's kind of where I see it, and it's aligning with what you just said. So maybe from a takeaway here as we kind of draw to an end on this. Uh, what are some key takeaways? What's the call to action that as we're ending the year and we start a new year, you have this great research report out there. We're going to share that link so that people can download it. Um, any key call to action that you want listeners to take from this today?
I think it depends on who the listener is.
So let's break it into the seller versus, say, the leadership. So from a leadership perspective, start there. What should leaders be doing?
If I'm a leader going into 2025, I am going to take a step back and I am going to stop looking at my pipeline for 5 minutes. And I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to say, okay, how well structured and developed is my sales organization? And I'm going to run that through the 3 layers. I'm going to assess my skills layer. What type of programs do I have in place to train my sales team? Do I have a methodology in place that the sales team is using on a regular basis? Is that sales methodology embraced throughout the entire organization? Do we train people on it when they come in? You see what I'm saying? Like, what type of training programs do we have in place now? So basically, I'm going to ask the question, what do I have from an ongoing skills development perspective? Not just do I bring in training? Well, yeah, I brought in training 3 years ago, but literally, what do we have in place that is allowing the development of new reps and maintaining and allowing places for existing reps to continue to strengthen or maintain their skill set? So I'm looking at that level. Then I'm looking at the opportunity layer, and I'm asking myself again, how well structured and how effective is my opportunity management layer? How much support is my middle management or my frontline managers giving to salespeople? What type of tools do I have in place to help my my sales reps get the proper bid information, to do a proper discovery? How am I capturing that data? What type of feedback am I giving them in that opportunity? So what type of deal strategy am I employing or helping them deploy? What type of deal process have I implemented? So does the deal process help and ensure that the deals are moving through properly? Like, I'm evaluating how is the methodology being pulled through at the opportunity layer. So I'm doing all that. And then I'm doing the same thing for the forecasting layer. What am I allowing being forecasted? Do I have a forecasting methodology? Do I have a forecasting criteria? How is that connected to the opportunity layer so I can see consistencies of when somebody forecasts that, what evidence they have that it's the right one? What criteria do they use to be forecasted? Am I tracking their forecasting accuracy, et cetera? So I'm looking at evaluating all of that. And then where I have holes, I'm going to fix those. As it comes to a salesperson, your job moving into 2025 is ask you, how well are you able to assess a buyer's environment, and how good are you at uncovering the problems your buyers are having and why they exist? And are you able to position yourself as a resource that your buyer says, oh, this guy gets us. I want to continue to talk to her because she is going to help us make the right decision. You need to move. My message to sellers is you need to move from a product pitcher to a problem identifier. And if you can't do that, you're just living in 1995.
Yeah, and I think throw that into the mix of how prospecting right, in kind of the virtual realm versus enterprise sellers, say back in 17, 18, like myself, where I was on the road 4 or 5 days a week. That's no longer in play now. Maybe you're traveling twice, 3 times a month versus the 17 times. So I think it just brings up again that when you are able to get that buying decision team exec, that time gets back to this, that you've got to be a lot more on your game, because you're not going to have, that hour and a half to 2 hours over a dinner getting them to talk and getting them to, like, that's rare these days.
Mhm.
So this is very enlightening, and I appreciate your time, big guy. And anything else you want to do a final plug? Like Keenan, obviously on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. That's how I found Keenan. But any workshops or anything coming up that you want to share?
Well, we did one just today, but here's the cool part about our workshops. They're called Gapinars. You go to, this is great for individual contributors. If your company won't pay for training, if you're not getting the training at your company or anywhere else, and you want to take your sales skills to the next level, you want to drive more quota, you want to improve your win rates, et cetera, then go to Gap Plus. So you just go to Gap Online Training. Wait, is it Gap Selling Online? Gap Selling Online Training. That's kind of a long one. Gap Selling Online Training. And we have a product called Gap Plus, which is a whole interactive online training for the gap selling methodology. It's super interactive. It is choose your own journey. So as you answer questions, it takes you in different directions. And, in typical Keenan fashion, you pick the wrong answer, and I literally yell at you, like, what? Clearly you haven't been paying attention if this is the answer you just picked. Go back, because you're not doing it right. So it's funny. It keeps you on your toes. And then also, as part of Gap Plus, you have access to every Gap webinar we do in our library. So you can attend live, or you can go back and watch them later, and you can continue to be engaged. We also are adding office hours where people can sit and have questions for for any of our certified trainers. And we also have an Ask Keenan every quarter. So it's a pretty robust offering that you can stay engaged and learn constantly.
I definitely, again, thank you. And I can't stress enough to my network, and this is why I picked Keenan to do this. He is the most passionate thought leader out there. And I can highly recommend that with his way of moving online and making this more efficient, that every seller, every sales organization should be using his GAP methodology. And I can't thank you enough, big guy. So Matt Slonaker, Growth in Action Podcast, signing off. Thank you, everyone. And again, reach out to Keenan on LinkedIn. And thanks, Keenan.
Thank you, baby. All right, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, big guy.
You got it. Let us know when it's coming up. Keep in touch with my team, and we'll share it.
All right, big
And then
guy.
if you could send us a copy of it as well, we'll cut pieces out and put up.
Yeah, yeah. I think on the recording, since you were the host, you should get that.
I added your note taker.
Okay. Yep. Awesome. All right. So we'll have that. That video is kind of raw. I'll download that and get it to you, because you guys will probably do a better job editing it.
Oh yeah, I did record it too. So yeah, so I'll send it to that's right. I'll send it to I think.
Yeah. And then what I'll do
Okay.
is I'll focus on the podcast side of it through Spotify. I'll get that loaded and send that to you.
Okay, perfect.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, bro. Be good.
You too.